this documentary?
The purpose of the documentary is to clarify and to notify. Clarifying what is contained in the book, My Love is One, what I learned from the Messiah about love, family, climate change, and the second coming, as well as to notify people about what's happening and what's about to happen.
Why are we here?
We're here to learn. We're here to learn how to love. How to love unconditionally, how to love not because we want to be loved, but literally to love again. And I know we have people that we love in our lives, our family, our children, our friends, but rarely do you see people just going out of their way. When you love, you do things a certain way, you act a certain way, you treat people a certain way. It's not this person is like me, therefore I will like that person, or I like this person because this person has done this for me, or I love this person because this person loves me. Learning to love, you can start with the golden rule, love thy neighbor as thyself. But I don't really think that's enough because it's almost kind of corny, because in a way, even though it sounds really good, a lot of people don't love themselves. So when you say love your neighbor as yourself, and then if you're abusing yourself in any way with substance abuse, or you're just not doing things that express your love for even yourself, I mean, you can't really call it loving other people to that degree. So to love others means when you walk out your door, you do things that are loving, that are generous. When you're waiting in traffic, you're patient, or you let somebody in, or when you're in the store, you don't jump ahead of other people, or, I mean, those are just little gestures, but it adds up during the course of a day and then one's life, and you're kind of building on that. Yeah, you're building on that. And everything you do in a more loving way, it not only changes your character, it really does change your overall disposition. And this part, I think, may bother some people, but every time you love someone, and the Jews call it doing a mitzvah, doing a kindness for another person, you really are getting credits in heaven. You're getting, it's being recorded. Everything, every good deed, and I'm going to focus on the good deeds because you know the contrary of that. You know selfishness, or it's all about me, or I have to focus, or I have to take care. There's nothing wrong with focusing and accomplishing your goals, because everyone has certain gifts and talents. And I do mean everyone has certain gifts and talents. And when you come back into relationship with the Creator, you find out what your gifts and talents are, which goes back to why you are here, to express those gifts and talents in a loving way that serves others. And I know a lot of people have gifts and talents and they like to gratify themselves. And there's nothing wrong with being happy and enjoying the gifts and talents, because they're yours and it's natural and it causes you to grow and to flourish, and it's something that you can do better than someone else, especially if you have that natural inclination. It's the gift and talent that was placed within you. But to use it to serve others is very important. It's vital. And it's important that those gifts and talents that you share enhance the lives of other people in some way, because you're always in some way either adding or subtracting from other people's lives and souls. And if you find something that feeds your soul and adds to the well-being of others, you're adding to them also. And you really do get credit for that. And you'll need it later. A lot of people plan for the here and now, but what comes after this? These bodies are on loan. It's kind of like when you get the tuxedo, when you go to the prom, You have to return it. But everything that you did in terms of loving and adding and I love is not something that's just limited to something that's sensual. Behaving in a loving, kind manner is love also. But that enhances, these are things that's the only thing that you really get to take with you when all is said and done. It's the one thing at the end that people don't realize. If you're lucky enough to stand before the judge and the book of life is open, because not everyone gets to stand before the judge. And I think a lot of people assume that when you leave here, everyone will be there on Judgment Day. But if you did absolutely nothing, there's nothing to read. I mean, you have to first be alive to be in the book of life. Right?
Right.
So to assume that you'll be there and you don't even acknowledge your soul or your spirit, the part of you that is alive. Because when you think about it, when someone dies, it just means their soul has left their body, right? Mm-hmm. Drop your body like a tuxedo, you send it back to where it came from. It came from the ground and the dust, right? So it's just you return it. And you really are returning it because it's not like it's flesh. You return to the soil and the earth and so forth, and it does get buried, but your soul is the only thing, if it is alive, that it will even matter in the end. But what you did with your soul, if you even, I call it activating it. I call it activating your soul. That's really important. That's a whole other topic. Shall we even talk about that?
Yes, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
I call it activating your soul. And what I mean by that is when I first started my whole conversation, how it started for me, I was very much a skeptic. I did not grow up in a religious household. And the first chapter, the first book in Genesis, it was like, how many times are you going to address these people? They have a spirit, they have a soul. What? So I realized that there's a little bit more to it. I was like, yeah, but there's a spirit, they're clothed in a spirit, and then they have a soul. It's like, and then they put on these bodies. I'm like, but if you never acknowledge your soul, if you are a spirit, I'm actually going to read that. Now, I'm not going to just say if, because I asked that question for a very long time. And the way I asked the question was, it was a little bit of, I'm going to be honest, I sounded like a little bit like a punk. I was like, I'm not going any further to explain this, because this doesn't make any sense. How many times are you going to address these people? You dress them once, and you dress them again. I'm going to show you where I was, and that I didn't do a thing until I got an answer. Now, mind you, I was the child who did not like vegetables from a can as a child. I love vegetables now. But if you put it on my plate, and I didn't think it looked right, I mean, it looked like wet, there was nothing lively or beautiful or anything about it. I would sit there, and my parents would say, you're going to sit there until you finish eating your vegetables. And in my head, I would say, well, how long could that be? Maybe a day, maybe two. Well, they're going to make me go to school tomorrow, so I think I can hold off for 24 hours. And I would sit there until I fell asleep at the table. Yes, I was that child. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But I had that same attitude when it came to reading the Bible. I said, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to move forward until you explain this to me. Now, okay, that was an excuse for me not to complete reading it. Now, I'm going to share with you where I was, because little did I know that this book was alive, and it was like standing in a room with someone, and they're like on the other side of the curtain, and you're talking, and they're like, you know what I mean? And it started the conversation. But here it is. I'm going to show you where I just stayed on it, like sat on it for like, not kidding, like 10 years. And then when I started getting my answers, I was like, who is that? But the weird part, it wasn't just that I got my answer. It was like, I remembered the question because I was going to use that excuse to say, there is no such thing as God. You can't answer that for me. We're not going to have a conversation. So this was it. Okay, first of all, this is what I read. Okay, Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Okay, so God created man in his own image. We know God is a spirit, right? So I'm saying to myself, God is a spirit in his own image. And then male and female, he created he them. So I'm seeing he created he them, male and female. So I sat there for a minute and I'm like, what are you saying? Father, male and female. God's male and female. You're a spirit and yet you're male. What? That was the first thing. So I sat with that for a minute. Yeah, like that. Then I read on a little bit. I actually got to chapter 2 and I was like, let's see how this unfolds, okay? Genesis 2, and I'm going to read that whole portion because there was so much in here. And I'm like, I'm just going to share this with you. I want to be honest with you about this because when you say, why should I believe you? And I'm like, I wouldn't believe, why? I mean, if I didn't have the experience myself, but what it did do is when I heard other people, I started wondering and I did my own homework. So Genesis 2 and 7, and I'll read 7 through 10 because that's where that whole next thing, and they're starting to dress again, okay? First he created them male and female, right, in the first. And then Genesis 2 and 7 says, And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul. Not just a soul, but a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden. And there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. Now I said a lot. Okay, I'm going to tell you first that I stopped at 7 when it said, and man became a living soul. So I'm saying to myself, he breathed into his nostrils. And the man became a living soul. I said, wasn't man a living soul when you created man in your image? Like, what was he then? Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay, when are you going to finish dressing this guy? I mean, are we still in the making? What's going on here? Now, what I'm saying here is literally was a 10-year conversation. Okay, so it may not take you this long. You're probably sharper than me, but I am very serious when I say that all of this right here gave me reason to just say, what? So that was the second layer. First was a spirit and then a living soul, which I thought he was already a living soul back in Genesis 1:27. What did I know? But then this kind of like got me. When out of the ground the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight. You're thinking that it's just a tree. Okay, this is why it was like a long conversation, because I realized that there was like this whole energy kind of behind, like, let's see if she's serious. Let's see if she's really interested, or if she's just like, this is like a passing conversation or curiosity. She'll move on to something else. She always moves on to something else. She's curious. And I was like, no, I'm serious. It's like that. How long could I sit at that table and not eat that plate of wax vegetables? A long time. I knew I'd have to go to school the next day. I knew my parents loved me enough not to let me starve. And I'm telling you, I love vegetables now, but they have to be made a certain way. I like them fresh. Sorry. This layer, let's just say that you've dressed them twice. They're a spirit. They're a soul. Now you're thinking, like I was thinking, that these are trees. Like arble, like just trees in the garden. Not so. And I'm not sure if I should even tell you, because it took me 10 years to get that answer. Okay? So you're going to have to do a little bit of your own homework. But I just want you to know that when you go in there and you start digging into that treasure chest, I want you to think about, what does it mean when you say, the Lord God had every tree to grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Oh, and by the way, the tree of life also is in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. On top of that, no words lost here, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. I want you to pay attention. 2 things. In Genesis 2:8, the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden. Eastward in Eden. The reason why I said consider the original text, which was in Hebrew, and an older format and so forth, older form. And I just want you to know, although I have my own relationship, and it's not like stagnant, it's ever growing, and I want you to understand that it's kind of like when you were learning how to walk as a child. Like, it's like any child. When you teach a child how to walk, as a parent, you stand in front of your child and you just say, come on, come on. And it's a constant, and I don't care how old you get, you're just a little bit more, the original context, and it's still in here. There's these layers, and you just can't go reading it like you're reading a book. It really is like you're sitting down and it's not like eating your vegetables. It's actually better, because you'll get curious and you're like, it's almost like a puzzle, but it really is right there. And you really do have to learn the language, because this is another, and I don't mean in terms of just another language in terms of speech, but a way of communicating. And I don't think I've ever had a one-dimensional conversation with God. I'm telling you, there are still conversations now that I thought, oh, that was a sentence, and I had that, and then I think about it later, and I'm like, you also meant that. What? But there's no way that I could have understood it back then, because I didn't have that understanding or level of maturity as yet. It's kind of like when you go to a family movie and they have some, adult language, and I don't mean in terms of, being rude or anything like that, but I just mean like they're speaking to children, and then at the same time they're speaking to the parents, and they're using metaphors or whatever, and you're like, did you just say that? And the kids didn't get it. It's completely over their heads. But I do want you to pay attention to the part that is eastward in Eden. And then I want you to think about, if you're sitting there, your right is my left, right? My right is your left. Your east is my west, depending on what side you're standing on. And when you have that conversation, and you will, because once you come into any situation where the light switch has been turned on, you've entered into that whole process for yourself. So I'm going to leave you with that question so that you can actually look at it for yourself. And then I'm just going to read the one last part. But that part, I want you to really look at Genesis 2, 7 through 10, because it's loaded, okay? And then 3 and 21, that's when this is when I said, okay, I was like, just sayonara, I signed off for a bit, because I was like, okay, I thought we were dressed, I thought we were finished, I thought you had the conversation. And then 3 and 21, God is now giving Adam a body. Unto Adam also, and to his wife, did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothed them. And the Lord God said, behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Now it seems like it cuts off, but I just want to finish this part. Therefore, the Lord God sent him forth from the garden of Eve. I said Eve. There was nothing evil about Eden, sorry. Eden, to till the ground from whence he came. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. There is no context wasted here. And I say that because we're at an age now in history where we've come almost full circle. I wouldn't say full circle because we'd be back there in the same problem. We'll say 180. Where you have enough people who are gaining understanding. Most people have access to education, a free education, most, not all, and it should be available to all. But we're at an age where information is being expedited to make information available online and in the schoolroom so that you have free access to this type of knowledge and information so that you can stop and consider for yourself and collectively for yourselves. But that being dressed 3 times, it was that time that Adam was clothed with, well, he calls it coats of skins. But I kind of think of it like, in other contexts, it says, with, like the beast, like, in terms of animal skins. So you have to think that there was this whole living entity who was a spirit and a living soul, and then something happened. Think about when you have something that's light. I'll describe it this way. Envision a lamp, and you put a blanket over it. Yeah, put a heavy blanket over a really bright lamp. Can you see as clearly? Because right now you're all wearing animal skins, so to speak, or skins, and you're covering a light, which is your soul, and your spirit, which is exactly like God, which is the part of you that communicates with God. But if your entire life you have fed your flesh, your body, we eat however many meals a day that you eat, whatever that means to you, but you have never fed your soul, then your soul is starving. Go eat. This is a delicious meal.